personally like that video very much. I think it elaborates rather clearly and simply what and how to think about the queer in our analysis and how to account for it also in the analysis of gender and gender relations. So if gender, analytically speaking, is about the coded order of the world into masculine and feminine fields and their hierarchies. And if we then ask logs, what about the split in between the masculine and feminine? And we do need to understand that the split refers to including but not limited to. So gender, even as an analytical category, should be understood as much more than the dichotomy between the feminine and masculine. So in your analysis, pay attention to the split in between, and for support, you can find wonderful literature in queer international political economy, of which I think we could have a whole another lecture as well. So I've given this lecture various times to different audiences, and sometimes I get the provocative question from the audience asking, but come on, isn't feminist research biased? As in not objective? Because, personal is political. So if it's somebody's personal and not objective and distanced from the world and from what people think about the world and from the everyday, it must be somehow biased. And my question then is, biased how? Biased for whom? Which research traditions are not biased? And here I want to turn to the question of situated knowledges in feminist international political economy. Situated knowledges is a concept coined by Donna Haraway in an article which I think has more or less the same title, and it is in your reading materials. It's from 1988. And Donna Haraway argues, and the understanding of situated knowledges in feminist analysis refers to the fact, and this is a fact, that all knowledge comes from somewhere, comes from particular subject positions in the world. So all knowledge is tied to particular subject positions. It is articulated in and through particular discourses under particular material conditions. And then somebody working with more positivist tradition would say, but numbers and quantitative approaches, they are not about discourses. And they are really, because we always have to make choices when we build our research designs, like which factors do we count in, which variables do we include in our research designs, be they quantitative or qualitative, be they positivist or post-positivist. So all knowledge, all research is situated. In a sense, this also means that all knowledge is somehow biased to something. And recognizing these biases and kind of openly acknowledging that these are the subject positions from which I speak from, these are the assumptions of the world that I build upon, is much more objective than saying that, but my research is not biased at all, or this is the most objective view of the world and it is somehow distanced from where I stand and the choices that I make. And this is more or less, like, really simply put, what we understood in Feminist IPE, the concept of situated knowledges. So then we might also ask, going back to it, and I'm pointing out to this provocative question because I have received that from the audience at least a couple of times. So it's kind of speaking back to somebody, imagine devil's advocate in the audience of this video. So I would also then ask, like, isn't international political economy and global political economy kind of one big question of bias in many ways? Unless we recognize from which subject positions, theories, the approaches, the subject matters that we study are produced and recognized. We need to ask in our analysis, and I think this is a particularly feminist thing to say, going back to the fact that the personal is political, we need to ask when we do our research and when we study the world, whose interests are heard and served in the economy and at the cost of whom. When we study this or that subject matter, we then are turning our backs to some other questions. We are silencing other questions. So what is being silenced when this argument is made? And we will come back to this in my lecture on post-structuralist IPE. We need to ask whose personal is political, who is silenced, who is outright written out from the economic order so that they cannot articulate their interest in economically viable language. And here Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak's concept of epistemic violence is something that you might want to check out. Then we need to ask about the political economies of situated knowledges. If all knowledge derives from particular subpositions, and then there are certain economic truths and certain economic policies that are followed and in the world and that are predominating political decisions, isn't that then a bit of a struggle between situated knowledges? Aren't there maybe some gendered power relations at play? Perhaps there are some questions of femininities and masculinities and the split in between that we need to look at in order to understand why it is these discourses of economics that are prevailing in the world and that are shaping the politics of the world. We need to ask who in the present world can speak the economic in understandable terms, whose arguments about the economy are taken seriously. Is it carers in the private household who take care of children and of persons with disabilities and the elderly, who are making it possible for others to take part in the productive economy? In public health systems, are we listening to nurses' arguments about what is economically viable? Or do we rather turn to the physicians' views, to the views of the doctors, to the views of the politicians? Whose lives matter in the economic speech? Whose lives are understood as lives that need to be preserved, or lifestyles that need to be preserved? What kinds of gendered knowledges of the economy are articulable, understandable, and rational? What sort of economic knowledge makes sense? Why? Which questions about the economy make sense and can be asked and can be heard? Which are outright ridiculous, which are considered as ridiculous? How we answer to these questions imply constant configurations of gendered power. And this gendered power and these gendered power relations within our economic understanding of the world are always intersectionally gendered, and they are also always in the making, which means that there is always an opening for change available. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today in feminist international political economy. And also, I think a lot of what I've said has been completely adequate. I think there should be a whole lecture series about these matters. But I hope that you did get some tools to think about international political economy and global political economy from feminist perspectives and through gendered and sexualized power relations as they entangle in the world in the most intersectional ways. And I want to finish the lecture by returning to the concept of intersectionality. The concept was originally coined by by an American civil rights advocate, legal scholar, and Black feminist Kimberly Crenshaw. And you will find her article where the term was originally coined in the reading materials. The concept and the debates over intersectionality have developed since, and it's been taken over and used and abused in various ways. But I still want to finish with Kimberly Crenshaw's somewhat more recent TED Talk, where she points out to the urgency of intersectionality. The talk is, of course, relates to particular context, but I would like you to consider the different themes that I've discussed today in this lecture, from different understandings of gender, how it plays out in the economic discourse, how gender can be opted and co-opted for different economic purposes and political purposes, to our thinking about analytical differentiations between feminities and masculinities and the important split in between the queer. Yes, let's turn to the last video and just watch the video and see what kind of impact it leaves with you.